Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool review for you guys from the brand MT&W or Memento Tide and Watch. They're essentially a Hong Kong-based microbrand comprised of enthusiasts from Hong Kong, the UK, and Italy, working to combine diverse perspectives and expertise to create timepieces that blend timeless craftsmanship with modern innovation. In terms of the type of watch, this is a traveler's watch. Some key characteristics and design, if you're looking for something within that genre. Of course, you want to find a GMT or world timer functionality so that you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is known as their Oracle GMT in the black colorway, and it's drawing inspiration from the spellbinding lines and shapes of the Oracle bone script. This enthralling design infuses your wrist with an air of history and enchantment. Personally, I think this kind of reminds me of TRON, which also looks really, really cool. But in terms of this particular watch, guys, it goes for $349 USD. So really quite a steal when you consider all of the specs that are packed into this piece. And this sample was kindly sent in by MT&W for this review. It's a 40 millimeter watch, and it's honestly quite nice. It just does it all, has it all, and doesn't cost at all too much. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so really handsome. I mean, a lot of great contrast on this piece, whether it be the satin versus the high polished, or the black versus the steel, the black versus the white there, or even the great texturing there on that center dial section against, you know, some really cool and different, not fully indexed, unfortunately, right? Which I would always prefer, but I do understand the clean look. And, you know, for the most part, a lot of folks are looking at their watches at a glance anyway. So making those estimations in between 5-minute increments shouldn't be an issue. But when it comes to the footprint of this piece, 40 millimeters in diameter, 12.6 millimeters thin, which is quite nice. And then 48 millimeters lug to lug. So that obviously sits quite well. And you can see nice contouring in terms of the shape of the watch. Now, the watch is made out of stainless steel, brushed with polished accents. It does have a flat sapphire crystal with inner AR coating, and it also has a flat sapphire insert that is nicely loomed on this 48 click bi-directional bezel. So very cool. The clicks aren't super audible like you might get with like a dive watch, but they are. Let me see if I can get them here. They are there. They do click, and honestly, I think it's a nice balanced click between smooth and clicky. And again, this is a travel, a GMT bezel, not a 60-minute dive time bezel. In terms of the alignment, I will say it could be better, in terms of where it rests on the click. The nice thing is there's just the right amount of give in here to where you can really get it lined up spot on. And I'll try to do that. There you go. And then I'll give it a quick little wipe now, because yes, all those glossy surfaces of sapphire and high polished are going to, they're going to get fingerprints on there. Of course, that is more of a care for me while I'm handling the watch this way. In reality, it'll be on your wrist and you won't constantly be touching it. You'll just probably have to wipe it off after you use the bezel from time to time, which most people rarely use. In this case, this does have a really, let's not skip anything here. Screw down crown at 3 o'clock, nicely signed. And then also the movement inside, although you can't see it through this nicely etched solid case back, is going to be your Seiko NH. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm just trying to get the camera to focus there. Lost track of what I said. The NH, a 34 collar style GMT. So 41-hour power reserve, beats at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. And the thing that makes it a collar GMT versus a traveler's GMT is because the 24-hour hand is independently adjustable, and you're getting that quick set date feature versus on a traveler's GMT or a flyer GMT, where essentially you're going to be able to jump the hour hand hand, the local hour hand. So then you would leave this hand to your home time zone and you would jump the local as you travel, right? Here it's a bit of a reverse, and it's not to say it's any lesser. To be honest, I mean, ETA and Sellita, very expensive watches, have this type of setup. It's really a small number that are capable until very recently, thanks to Miyota, in terms of having that more flyer style GMT. What makes this very useful is, of course, you do get the quick set date adjustment, which is much easier for setting the date or resetting the date if your power reserve dies out or anything like that. Or of course, if there's, you're in a month where there's not 31 days and, there's 31 days on the wheel there. So you're not going to have to play with that, as much, because it'll be really easy to quick set the date. The nice thing is when you use it this way, right, which is the way I primarily use it, people call it an office or a caller style GMT, because you can use it for making calls from the office. So what I'll do is I'll set this GMT hand to, let's say, East Coast time, or Central time, or anything like that, or even the time in Japan. And what I'll do is I'll track that time by 24 hours, and then I'll use my local time for whatever my local time is. And I'll go, oh, okay, hey, well, in the East Coast right now, it's, 3 hours ahead. So then you would be able to know that that's 3 hours ahead. So that's basically how you would use it. You don't have to worry about AM or PM because it's a 24-hour scale. So it just makes it quite easy, and your home timekeeping is going to be your home timekeeping, so you're fine. So there's, again, bunch of different ways to use that. I don't want to get too much into it because really this isn't about the choice of movement or the style of GMT. This is really about the style of watch and the choice of, hey, is this timepiece one that you could potentially wear and enjoy? I think there's definitely a lot to like here. Check out this setup. Look at the dual finish in terms of that black dial with the printed index. Very nice high contrast. And then you, of course, do have that center section with that really cool patterning there, which I think just adds the right amount of visual interest. You do have the date window at 3, which is nicely framed. You have Superluminova grade A BGW9, so it's going to look very nice and white in daylight, and then have a really nice blue hue in darkness. Also, you're going to notice the skeletonized hands, and it's actually a faux skeletonization on the seconds hand. They just kind of blacked it out a little bit, and it looks really, really good. But when it comes to that hour and minute hand, look at how good that looks. It just flows. The line weight on the framing is really nicely complementing the line weight of that indexing, which I think looks quite nice. Also, the font generally here, it all kind of suits that futuristic kind of contemporary styling that you're getting here, which I think looks really good. You're also going to get 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance, which is great, especially with that screw down crown, solid case back, etc. So although you can't use this as a dive watch, you can absolutely be comfortable with any types of water contact, water sports, anything like that. Getting really sweaty, getting this thing gross and dirty, and then just running it underneath the faucet and scrubbing it dry to get it cleaned, as long as that crown is fully locked down and engaged with all the seals that are inside. Now, the lug width here, 20 millimeter lug width, which is going to be very useful. So you can try this with a bunch of different straps, with that 20 millimeter diameter. That's great. But I will say, the bracelet flows really well. I mean, look at the integration for the end link. That's not something that I live and die by. I find sometimes that it's purposely meant to show the break in design in terms of the bracelet. Like you think about, let's say, a Rolex and the Jubilee. The Jubilee doesn't beautifully filter and integrate into the end link, into the case ends. It's actually very deliberate, right? Like when you're running a NATO strap through something and there's just that's where the bracelet goes, right? So I think people do kind of overvalue sometimes the integration of the end link, but for those of you that do, I think this is integrated really, really well. Although again, that's not a huge selling point for me, but what is a selling point is going to be the fact that it does have a nice bracelet, well constructed. It also does have screw pin construction, twin trigger, folding clasp, fully milled on the scissor section, while I believe this outer section is stamped, but it does keep everything nice and tidy. You're also going to get all of these points of manual micro adjustment, 5 positions, and a nice little taper, 2mm taper, which is nice and classic, from 20mm down to about 18. And then the clasp itself is going to be about 19.5mm. And of course, you're going to have that nice push button action. The buttons themselves there aren't like big, chunky, and milled, but they absolutely do the job. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this looks really well. It fits well. It's sized very nicely. The proportions are nice and clean, very legible, and very readable. You can see sits nice and flat, great contours. I do enjoy a nice high polished bevel, although, you know, all brands are kind of doing that these days. Still doesn't change the fact that I like it. It brings in a lot of nice visual interest. Also, the bracelet kind of has that flat link setup there, so it's going to play with the light in a really interesting way. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get a fair amount of perspective distortion, which is going to make the watch seem a little bit larger than it actually is because of the focal length. Now, what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and as you can see here, it's already looking quite different. And then I'll tighten up the frame, and you guys can still get a detailed look, but just, I think, at a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And check that out. Very, very clean. Nice organic flow, but you're still getting those beautiful angles for playing with the light. Also, you're getting something that looks quite different, kind of fun, right? It has a nice vibe to it. I do feel the crown might be sticking out a little bit too much. I think I might have preferred more width on the crown versus length. But it doesn't look bad in my opinion. It's just something that, you know, maybe in future iterations, if they choose to tweak it, or maybe if they added crown guards or something like that, it would help it flow just a little bit better. But I think overall, of course, the thing that I enjoy about watches is how different they are from each other. And then I don't want them all to look the same. And I think, unfortunately, that's a lot of what the comment section is these days, is everybody kind of wants everything to be a Rolex, whether they like it or not. The fact that Rolex has been so popular and so many factory brands have just copied all of Rolex's traits and made them very cheap, it makes kind of everybody feel the need to say, hey, well, if a cheap micro brand can have this, then every brand should have it. Well, not every brand is wanting to be Rolex. Some brands have their own identity and they want to be themselves, which is cool. And I think in terms of what you want, be sure that you want what you actually want and not just a diminished, cheaper, more affordable version of something else that's desirable. Find something that strikes you as interesting and desirable for its own merits, not because of anything else otherwise in terms of perception, even if it's perceived value, whether it be perceived value through heritage, and longevity, or perceived value through a spec sheet. I mean, there are so many watches, especially ones that gets, plastered all over YouTube, that have the greatest, tallest spec sheets, and it doesn't make them any more desirable, in my opinion. It just means that they are value rich. But there's a lot of value brand stuff that's out there that is not necessarily the stuff that anybody's out hunting for, right? Like, you get the stuff that's within your means, of course, but, I don't think if given the choice, anybody's out saying, hey, look, my ultimate want or need would be the cheapest version available. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera back out again, get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, great luminosity there, very, very potent, really well applied, and again, super legible, just as legible as it is in the daylight, even down to that seconds hand lume, which I think looks really, really sharp. Now, when it comes to, of course, these Lume shots, one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see there, in terms of the body and bracelet brushing, really nice uniform way that the light glides slides over it. Of course, you're going to have those deep, dark, polished sections, which are nice and glossy. And here you can see maybe a little bit of cloudiness from just a little bit of oil, fingerprints, whatever, being wiped off. And then you're going to have a little bit of glossiness to that bezel insert, as well as the crystal itself, which does a nice job of disappearing and letting you enjoy that beautiful dial. Again, not for everybody. It's very different. I mean, even the inspirations themselves are quite original, let alone the actual execution. Again, that is also quite different, but I think it looks really good. So we'll go ahead and get the lights back on and get into some closing thoughts. All right, guys, on the wrist, wears great. Nice low profile wear, surprisingly thin for a Seiko NH powered watch. Also, in terms of model variants, check the site links for current options and availability. At the time of recording, this is kind of their only option, and I think it looks great. Great one and done option, but I would love to see this in other colorways. Let me know down in the comments which ones would interest you. I think a blue dial would be killer. Maybe 2 or 3 different blue dials, honestly, with how many shades are out there. Purple dial, red dial, silver dial, white dial with a reverse black. Like, there's a lot of cool ways you could play with this aesthetic and really flip it on its head. In terms of comparable models, guys, there are a lot of vintage inspired GMTs in the independent microbrand space across a wide range of price points depending on movement, origin, with Japanese powered GMTs ranging between 400 to 1,000 depending on the choice of movement, right? Miyota versus Seiko. This one really stands out with its more modern and contemporary aesthetic that feels, you know, more like TRON than Bond when we think about, kind of its inspirations. Now, in terms of color style GMTs, this compares well against the Seiko 5 SSK GMTs, right? Or 5KX, whatever you want to call them. But you're actually getting more function forward capabilities, right? Because you're getting that click bezel versus the friction fit bezel, because you're getting sapphire instead of, hardlex mineral. So I do like those things. And then, you're getting some modern niceties as well in terms of screw pin construction. So yeah, there's a lot to like there from that standpoint, but honestly, it all depends, I think, hinges on aesthetically if you like the way this looks and you'd want to look down and see this on your wrist. Me personally, I think it looks pretty cool, but let me know what you guys think. For me, guys, the bottom line, the MT&W Oracle GMT is an impressive value proposition, even in a heavily saturated market segment. Yes, it seems like ever since those Seiko 5 GMTs came out, everybody's doing GMT watches, but they're highly desirable, and I can see why. And the fact that this is giving you a screw down crown with that diver like capabilities in terms of 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance. You're also getting diver like levels of lume, not necessarily of functionality and the legibility of each tick mark or anything like that, but hey, in deeper depths, this is still going to be very readable, and whether that's, the depth of the corners of the areas that you're hanging out at, or the depths within the waters that you might be treading around. So with that said, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're any, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.